Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collingwood for YouTube, and I'm here to continue my read-along review of The Dark Shadows Daybook, written by Patrick McCray. I am right here, guys. Check it out. Check out that artwork. That is beautiful. 1968. Okay, now it's Dark Shadows. Vicky returns to the 1960s, where Barnabas finds a cure by providing the life force for a Frankenstein's monster. It's a paradise of chicken legs and fancy buttons until Angelique reappears, and this time she's invoking her demon brother. Episode 461. 1968, Barnabas Collins faces the deadliest threat to his existence yet. Victoria Winters, Barnabas, Jonathan Frid. Vicky, almost hanged in 1796, immediately Corona ports back to 1968, changing places with Phyllis Wick. Barnabas is terrified that she'll out him, finally remembering who he really is. Julia seems delighted at the prospect. Back from 1795, episode 461, has a lot of work to do. In 1968 inherits a very different show than what we last saw several months ago. They just spent months in the 1790s dealing with witches, time travel, and Lewis Edmonds as a cat. The rules were always pretty wonky once Barnabas entered, but now the rule book is in the furnace, literally. Anything can happen. Dealing with a mind bender of a seance, with Vicky's cha-cha-cha body swap, with Phyllis Wick is an experience that transcends anything they've seen before. Ghost. There's a reason a ghost exists. Vampires. The same. A phoenix. Maybe not, but she at least tries to explain herself. But to the Collinses of 1968, there's nothing casual about what happened at the seance. As nutty as seances are, they're not time portals, and the Collinses react appropriately with a mix of frightened confusion and business-like problem solving. No one is more unsettled than Barnabas. Jonathan Frid unleashes an encyclopedia of frightened and baffled expressions and goes for a Guinness record for most ways a man can look like he's about to bolt from a room. Let me see if I have this. Julia is on the verge of blackmailing him. His blood doll, Carolyn, is too ambitious for her own good. He's in love with Vicky, who is kind of Josette, but not, because things with Maggie, who is kind of not Josette, but didn't really work out. Okay, that's life, walking into the seance. Now, his brain is split by two timelines that he's suddenly remembering at once, really complicating his relationship with Vicky. And under other circumstances, the accusation of vampirism could be easy to write off. But this woman just vanished, was replaced by someone no one had ever seen, and then reappeared in period dress with an instant bullet wound and rope burns around her neck. If she accuses someone of being a vampire, I'd be inclined to listen. Newcomers to this series are efficiently introduced to 1968, and veteran viewers are tantalized by the possibilities of returning to the present. The agendas of Barnabas, Julia, and Carolyn are clear. Julia instantly reveals herself as a doctor, thus ending one scam and opening a host of new story possibilities. Vicky represents new dangers based in what she knows of Barnabas, which heightens the need for Barnabas to intensify his pursuit of her in both timeline and means. Returning from the origin story, the show suddenly and definitively repositions Barnabas firmly as the dark hero and Vicky as the unwitting antagonist with the threat she presents. Fewer episodes are tighter or cover so much new ground. The cast seems revitalized, rehabilitating their characters with newfound confidence, comfort, and enthusiasm. All three of the core Collinses, Joan Bennett, Louis Edmonds, and Nancy Barrett, jump into the action with clarity and spark. Unseen since the show's inception, and in many ways it feels like a new premiere. I'm not sure that any other moment is redefining. The existence of an efficient, if baffling, time traveler mechanism reveals a universe where the characters are just that, characters. They are there to be manipulated for much larger and more mysterious reasons, and with a much more complex and unknowable clockwork than we have thought possible. Sometimes I think Dark Shadows fans write off mysterious time travel or universe shifting mechanics to expedient writing. Let's not do that. Let's at least comfort those shifts as the show's most unknowable puzzles. Let's take a moment to put these displacements center stage, happening for a reason, and with an agenda, even if the agenda is chaos. Collinwood and the surrounding estate almost become a strange, rocky, love-craven god. No, not that. Those gods had only contempt or disregard for humans. This is something else. This has a purpose. People are moved to specifically for this to be completely random. Discussions like these are the dinner bells for hungry pointification. I'll spare you except for the fish course. One of philosophical great debates is free will versus determination. Free will versus determination. Are people unpredictable, or are we all, or are all of their choices the inevitable result of what's happened before? Dark Shadows' answer is yes. Everything up to now is the result of the past. But starting now, we are perpetually free. Episode 462. The man of Vicky's dreams returns from the grave to warn her that Collinwood's most eligible bachelor is the wrong kind of lady killer. Barnabas Collins, Jonathan Frid. Post-hypnosis session, Vicky and Julia discuss the verisimilitude of her trip to the past in a dream. The ghost of Jeremiah warns Vicky that Barnabas will kill her. Later, Julia and Barnabas seemingly reach detent toward dealing with Vicky, with Barnabas pushing for collaboration. He then reveals that Vicky took the place of a governess who died in his time, and that her story rings true after Julia investigates Peter Bradford and Noah Gifford. Barnabas speaks of his connection to the past with Vicky. She says that Jeremiah warned her that Barnabas would harm her, but discounts it despite this. Barnabas later summons her to him with the call of the vampire. Cleaning up the biggest narrative risk by television since Elvis was glimpsed from the waist down takes more than one episode, and it will get one episode, maybe more, maybe years of them. They have to keep the show absolutely the same while transforming it radically to accommodate both heroes who become villains and upcoming villains far more dastardly than the ones in the past, even if they come from there. The show may have more dramatic moments, more climactic moments, but it has few that are as openly transformative. We see the time lapse of the flower opening, yet it's no time lapse. There are few changes like Julia's hair. What's great is that they spend an inordinate amount of time talking about it, almost as if Grayson Hall's husband wrote the episode. Sam clearly lost a bet here, just as Grayson seems to have lost a bet at the time of episode 1177, where he forces her to do a multi-act monologue about the show's most impossible complex storyline, 1840. Their home may have been a McCray Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, except the son was real and they never killed him. And now I'm a little surprised, because there may be more to the Julia Hare narrative, or herative, than I thought. It's all in the timing, because this is a genuine turning point for the character. Initially, so Barnabas is changing due to the lost love of Maggie/Josette, the possibilities of Miss Winters, the relief that Carolyn kind of gets stuff done, and the fact that Vicky knows his secret. Sort of, but not. Most importantly, Barnabas is changing because the audience loves him, so they'll introduce real villains for him to fight. To do that and be constantly undermined by Julia, if he can endure that, he could be taken seriously as someone who can stand up to Nicholas and Angelique. And he needs someone intelligent and capable of acting as a confidant. Confidant, yes. Thank you, sorry. Soaps are almost all dialogue. He requires a receptacle who can ask bright questions and trigger worthy challenges. Willie is not the man for that job. Both he and Julia will tell Barnabas that he can't possibly do whatever it is that he's planning, but Willie will just say so because it's his job to tell Barnabas he's wrong, especially once he gets the necktie. Julia takes great pride in both telling Barnabas that he's wrong and also why he's wrong. The haircut helps. I'm sure they didn't intend it as such, but artistic intentions are ultimately meaningless compared to interpretive consequences. And the consequence is that as her hair changes, she changes too. Okay, so what? Uncle called and said that Mark Slate wants his hair back and dyed blonde again. But what else about Grayson's coif? And I'm serious here. It's talked about a lot, both by people who like the show and those who don't. The big deal is two things. It's modern and it's masculine. The latter makes Julia visually even less of a romantic prospect. But that may be what she's going for. It emphasizes her visual strengths. sharp eyes, and sharper cheekbones. It's modernly is ideally timed after 1795. The females are visually harkened back to that era will always reflect in it in attitude. Similar those who don't will always be in stark contrast. Julia is a fine counter for Collinwood because it's about the past, and she's about the present and future. Iconoclastically so, the same goes for how she stands out against Barnabas as the symbol of the present versus his fidelity to the past. But he's moving into the present more and more. We can now compare present Barnabas with 1795. Barnabas Julia, so different than Barnabas, now has a hairstyle that's far more similar to his own. It's not a reflection. She is an echo, usually carrying a message that he may not want to acknowledge, but always needs. She is a contemporary voice for a man of the past, confronting the possibilities of the future. Barnabas is indeed transforming. The behavioral changes are not immediate, but Barnabas and Julia's conversation in the garden is ripe with serious influencing implications. Both want answers from Vicky. Both have means to get them rather than force them out. They both agree to work together. Vicky is someone neither means to harm. Maybe that's out of fear. Maybe it's out of compassion. Maybe enough people have been hurt. Up to now, Julia, bringing Woodard along, and Barnabas are the sources of harm and peril, with Collinwood enough of that. Vicky was dragged through time for a reason. She could implicate Barnabas, and Barnabas could implicate Julia, and yet being tattled on is just the surface threat. The unspoken peril is that some nameless force has power over time and space. Indeed, it continues to meddle with affairs, transmitting horrific dreams of cautionary prophecy before sending ambassadors from yesterday. Why does it toss them through centuries? Barnabas has heretofore survived because he can deny and obscure the past. But the intelligence that swapped Vicky and Winters has another agenda, and no identity to challenge, isolate, nor defeat. It's an existential threat that intrigues Julia and quietly terrifies Barnabas. It's the idea of everyone he's hoodwinked potentially being toward through his history, or from his past to the present. It is a legacy so unthinkable that it takes him nearly 200 years to sleep it off. Although he escapes the past is pushing him by sending threatening measures like Phyllis Wick. Who's next? These scenes are being studied. Vicky's obsession with Barnabas' native time is no help. They're trading places as a storytelling move. It's a masterstroke. If we compare Dark Shadows with the nighttime soaps of the golden era of Dallas, Collinsport is a study in change. So many series hit reset buttons with abandon, but when Dark Shadows decides that a formative experience is formative, they mean it. She'll never be as fun again, but we take comfort that on the fun scale, she was never exactly Carolyn anyway. If I'd been ripped around time, almost hanged as a witch, and had Peter Bradford making on me across the centuries, I wouldn't understand either. On the other side of the aisle, a new Barnabas must work with a new Julia. The vampire and the cowman should be friends. We may need to bite Vicky anyway, but that's insurance. It's also good TV, which Barnabas knows is evolution. Keep things moving at a steady rate. If there's no change and he runs into a Collins to bite, I don't think Mrs. Johnson will be his type. Yeah. If there's too much change, he's no longer Barnabas. Viewers keep returning. Sure, I'm not skipping page 2. Dark Shadows. Because, yes, there is growth. And it's just about as gradual as in real life. Sometimes you just glimpse it. In this case, it's between Barnabas and Julia in the garden. And that's a welcome respite for all of us. Episode 464. The women of Collinwood are compelled by desires beyond their control. When a swaggering stag of a man struts into the drawing room to stand before them, in the name of art. T. Elliot Stokes. There, David. After Angelique's painting causes Roger to call Julia, Countess Natalie, a knock at the door signals the arrival of a man who was supposed to buy the portrait. A fastidious occult expert named T. Elliot Stokes. Smelling salts are passed out for the woman, all of whom must be gently informed by Julia that this is what a real man looks like. He has deep knowledge of his ancestor, Ben, and shocks Barnabas with his suspicion that Vicky is connected to the 1790s. Barnabas later bites Victoria when Julia discovers this. She threatens him with exposure. Upon returning from 1795, the show moves at a rare brisk pace, piling on new choices, twists, and vital characters with zesty abandon. Nothing stimulates the imagination for writing like writing itself. It's as if the mythic level of 1795 gave them permission to think big. And the form-free liberty of 1968 gives them room to explore the results. In just 4 episodes, we gave Carolyn rebelling against Barnabas, Victoria finally under the control of the vampire, portents that Angelique will return, and now the arrival of one of the show's most memorable characters, the fabulous T. Elliot Stokes. Absolutely, he is memorable too. I'll have to do a character retrospective. The domination of Victoria is the most profoundly symbolic shift for the show since the arrival of Barnabas. Maybe more than that. It's one thing to quietly swipe protagonists. It's another to have the new one enslave the former protagonist and use her as a walking juice box. Victoria started out as a raven-haired Nancy Drew, and it's sad to see her devolve into little more than a bewildered victim. In the face of the characters who are built to be more interesting, the focal shift is inevitable. The fact that she is being consumed a literal fuel by and for the new lead is beautiful. Poignant irony. Barnabas, you truly do drink her milkshake. Barnabas needs all the blood-soaked Wheaties he can eat for this one. This shock of seeing Professor Stokes is either the best or the worst thing he's encountered in This Week from Hell. The fun of the reunion scene is in watching him Zeus out, which end of the spectrum it will be. Just as he needed a physical strongman in the 1790s, now he needs a paranormal heavy lifter. But with that brilliance comes the anatomy, and that's the last thing he needs in his associates, with Angelique in the offing. From his entrance, there David establishes a clear, confident, and charming character in Professor Stokes. The existence of Stokes also creates profound change in the fabric of the Dark Shadows universe. Up to this point, you either had civilians who had no idea what was going on, or antagonists who usually had only slightly more of an idea of what was going on. Stokes changes that, and does so with great wit and seasoned chokiness. No one delivers exposition with a greater gravitas, and no one has better judgment about when to look evil in the eye and tell it to catch that one and paint it green. On this day in 1968, Lucy Wallace was born. The connection, she played Xena Warrior Princess. Just maybe this is a character who would have landed Stokes and kept him up with him. Maybe. Episode 472. When Roger visits Lane on a hypnotized mission of murder, who will be Ahab and who will be the whale? Roger Collins, Lewis Edmonds. With the Angelique painting missing, Julie and Barnabas take the discovery of Lane's head mirror in Roger's bedroom as an indication that Roger is trying to kill the doctor. They show up in time to prevent Roger from stabbing Lane with a harpoon from the scientist collection. Lane, however, insists the notion that this is voodoo. After a Stokes encounter, Barnabas and Julia discover the painting, theoretically with Roger, is back at Collinwood. Lane also suggests that Barnabas might have more luck with Vicky if he looked like someone she's attracted to. Is there a way to adequately address the strangeness of episode 472? Yes, but I won't avail myself of it. Not when there are shallow and pearl double entendres to cite, because I think it's intentional. The episode was shot on April 8th. A week prior was April Fool's Day. And there is a possibility that 472 was written then, or revised, or sketched out, or vandalized. Let's face it, some form of this text was on someone's desk at that point. The show was just becoming comfortable with itself. They were now immune to the cancellation threat that loomed the prior year. The audience loved whatever the writers did. It was a high time for Gordon Russell to have fun, and he did. Make sure I'm not skipping pages here. Jonathan Frid and Addison Powell have comic chemistry that belongs in Noel Coward for half of the year, and alongside Gallagher and Sheen for the other. Powell begins the episode as a white-haired Gomez Adams, enthusiastically selling Barnabas on his new key to love and survival. Just look like Roger Davis, as long as Barnabas will allow some kind of extreme Roger Davis makeover. Vicky will be his. The details of how to look like Roger Davis are just those pesky details, and now Frid gets to do something completely different. His well-worn shtick with Julia and Willie is to suggest an extreme solution that forces them to bug-eyed double takes. Well, takes anyway. Finally, the hand is on the other foot, as Fred luxuriates in the pleasure of Pal doing the heavy lifting, while he rolls with deadpan incredulity. The show has finally gotten so implicitly outrageous that Barnabas, who was brought into the fold of conservative daytime bummerism to living it up, gets to be the measure of realism. The recovering vampire from the 1790s. And now the most relatable character for entire episodes. Let that sink in, and it's only taken about a week or so. When the show premiered, it took that long for characters to join a subject with a verb. Now Roger is hypnotized, Vicky is obsessed with one man from the past while being the obsession of another man from the past. Barnabas is a mostly cured romantic lead, and Julia has gone from trying to kill our hero to being Monk and Hamspock and Bones, and very much a smoky-voiced Jiminy Cricket to him. She and Barnabas have slipped into an effortless partnership, and as he explains what's an Angelique, and she does use it as a new reason to poison him, we see a series being born. Then there's Roger asking to hold Dr. Lane's harpoon. I'm not making this up, and there is no way on Diablos Red Earth that writer Gordon Russell wasn't smirking at standards and practices' inability to make effective objections. I won't say phallic frenzy because we're in mixed company, but you and I are seasoned sophistocrats of the world. We're not. Burgess have the rubes and wet blankets left the room. God, we're alone. Between us, phallic frenzy of all the props, I mean all of the props. And Roger keeps asking about it. When he's not insisting on preempting care for a stroke, fortunately, I'm not making this up. While the Wemford Roger is ostensibly there because a prospect dream told him he would die that night, the dream also said that his death wasn't for a few hours. So tell me about that harpoon. Let me hold it. You seem to be an expert on harpoons. I still have a few hours left to chat about harpoons before we talk about the unseen voice that foretold my doom. Right now, I want to know more about your hobby. And the more talk about harpoons, the more ridiculous the word becomes. Say it. Harpoon. It just sounds funny. And that's on the top of the weird notions, of course. We've already heard that Roger stole away with Angelique's painting, whereupon he booked the room at the Collins Port Inn for himself. And the ominous artwork locked himself away with it for the afternoon. Okay, that's not even subtext. That's just text. The actors admirably play it as straight as humanly possible. Powell later gets up to swipe the comic dynamic he had with Jonathan, going from playing the nut to playing the norm. As he attempts to take Roger seriously and look past the subtext, somewhere Leslie Nielsen was taking notes. It won't be long, however, that he's once again rolling his eyes and proclaiming that he's a man of science. This is Barnabas explaining how Angelique used black magic to torture the doctor. His evidence, Lane's head mirror, was found in Roger's bedroom. Only on Dark Shadows and the TV of the age would voodoo be the most reasonable explanation for finding a grown man personal articles in the bedroom of another grown man. I mean, yeah, it's true, but it's also a strange memo from another age. In some ways quaint, in some ways sad. Was Gordon Russell pointing all of this out? If only in code. If he were not a member of the family, he was most inevitably a friend. This is how to handle political moments. Tuck them so deeply into plots that people tell you you're seeing things, and it's all in your fevered imagination. You need to grow up. Yeah, whatever. It was a repressed and miserable time. The episode is a subtle and comical moment of the veteran lines being parted. On purpose. Not on purpose. Not sure, but there. Not literally. The truth is sometimes not important to state literally. And let's say that sometimes a harpoon is not a harpoon, and that head mirrors to get left in bedrooms for reasons other than voodoo. There's a just venial part of us that might giggle at the implications, but that chortling passes. When it does, there is a mature part within us that speaks up and wonders if this were code, because there was a need and reason for code in 1968. This is a vital history lesson. If only in my mind. That's a tribute to yet another facet of Dark Shadows. Code is communication. Code is an act of resistance. Even seeing code where none might be is an act of resistance, and there was a locked resist in 1968, and still in 2019. Harpoon. Episode 480. Heads up. Julia wigs out when she learns about Lane's big plan. But will Jeff Clark continue to stick his neck out? Barnabas. Jonathan Fred. Lane persuades Barnabas to recruit Julia's hypnotic aid to relieve Jeff Clark of his near beheading. When Julia learns the truth, she first vows to help the experiment, but decides to call the cops on Lane instead. Mention the Adams storyline to fans, and because Adam is so big, Shabling lug unconnected to the overall Collins family, you'll see the expression that is worn typically on by xenophobic toddlers dragged to cheese expos. Since Adam is missing a head, it may be the wrong time to talk about him as a sex symbol. However, it's the perfect time to figure out why the Adam storyline is there, both in the saga's timeline and the overall series. Back in the days of VHS or strip syndication reruns, these questions were as useless as an AA meeting in the drawing room. You were lucky to see any of the show. Whatever fell in your lap from the gods of money, TV timing, and Suncoast was a randomly distributed babble. Now, with the entire show in free streaming on Tubi, it's only proper to see how the show as one big red marble that you consider all at once. So what I'm getting at is the Adam storyline is the most important one to the series. Like Adam himself, it is a mechanically kind minuscule kind of importance. It is the fulcrum on which Barnabas' journey gains its most important leverage. And it does similar things for Julia. I bring it up because we were seeing the choices in an episode like 480 that galvanized their change. It is the change that will be celebrated in 1897, then challenged relentlessly until 1840, when our heroes reclaim their moral identity for the final time. But now they're just finding out that they have a moral identity to later reclaim. Barnabas' exploration of Julia's love gets Lane to put his gun away, which is always a claiming sight in a lab full of overpowered electronics and wildly volatile chemicals. Lane merely wants one more decapitation, one more life, so that his subscription to Science American isn't wasted. Helping Lane is an odd choice by Barnabas, especially in the light of the man he will be for much of the series, but it's practically dilemmatic compared to the actions Angelique forced him to make. He would probably even help Lane give the head donor some Novocaine so the decapitation sensation would be less conspicuous. It seems like he almost has her convinced. He is doing this for both survival and love, so she should try a bit of tenderness too. But Barnabas Collins is no Vicky Winters. In the siren department, and Julia's love suddenly falters with the price of sawing a man's head off. Although if she chose carefully, it would somewhat reduce the chattering bill at the wedding. So both Barnabas and Julia are aware of the moral stakes at play, and even though Julia is passing the test and Barnabas is failing, he is aware that he's failing as he moves from the world of the beast to the world of man. Lane is critical to the spectrum because he is a fusion of the best and worst of Barnabas and Julia. He's a monstrous psychopath and a man of science. Both can see the worst of themselves in him, and both can see the strange optimism and sense of purpose that will be their greatest motivational ally. Everyone is a swinner here. Laura Parker sells totally sincerity and total nonsense with a dash of seething jealousy, as she thanks Julia for being her only friend at Colin. Unbeknownst to Julia, they have everything in common. Both came to the area to do specific jobs the Collinses couldn't or wouldn't do. Both have assured powers to bend minds and bodies. Both arrived there under false pretenses. Both are in love with Barnabas. Yep. Two women enter. Only one will leave on her feet. Julia may not have Barnabas when she leaves 1840, but she does have Julia. I mean, she's alive. Yeah. Jonathan Frid's nervousness is once again his ally. As the actor flubs a few lines, so does Barnabas. That's what people do at gunpoint. Grayson Hall has the inability task of having to scream a whole lot. And this episode is the special delight of people who like to say she's a bad actor. Bollocks, she's a great actor. She is. She's a pro who was told to scream a whole lot. And that's exactly what she did. Roger Davis deserves special kudos for epitomizing the stakes of the episode. First roofied by Lane and then tied up in a bedroom. He arises from a slumber of uncomfortable subtext to explain to Julia what's happening. The dialogue deals a lot with stealing his head. and Davis does what actors are supposed to do. He, he justifies its authenticity, though tough words to pull off. Whether it were Shakespeare at his wordiest or poorly translated Strindberg, Davis had flirted with both and more as a stage actor and a teacher. If he can make that sound true, he can sell a man's understandable concerns. With being decapitated and arguably frivolous reasons. A late note in terms of when this falls, the show had not yet given up on the idea of Barnabas' soul entering a new body with a new face. Considering that this was in and around the first anniversary of the debut of Barnabas Collins, it would not surprise me if this were also in around the time for contract renegotiations. Could this have been a subtle message from Dan Curtis, the Sultan of subtlety, that Dark Shadows may have needed Barnabas Collins, but Barnabas Collins doesn't necessarily need Jonathan Frid? Of course, this is a wild theory, but I know that it would be on my mind were I there. Episode 494. Which is worse, a Joe who wants his girl back, a Julia who wants her guard back, or an Adam who wants his diamond earrings back? Willie is about to juggle all three. Willie Loomis, John Carlin. When Willie distracts Adam and with Josette's jewelry, he thinks they may also make a good peace offering for Maggie. After delighting her and flummoxing Joe by sneaking them into her purse, he is scolded by Julia for leaving his post. To calm Adam, she leaves Lane's tapes of Mozart after they leave Adam. Here's Lane's message about his link to Barnabas, whose name he repeats. Yeah, I'm reading a book and got my cup. Just when you thought it was safe to put the Josette storyline to bed, 494 resurrects it. It's helpful to casual viewers, however, so many new, or seemingly like Cassandra, characters have been introduced. Since the return from 1795 by touching upon Josette again, we resolve some of Willie's creepiness rather than ignore it. And we also tie the present into the past once again. Dark Shadows gives its viewers a lot of credit, calling back to the characters we haven't heard from in months, if not years. Paul Stoddard, we hardly knew ye. So true. Yeah. It's a strangely fetishistic episode, with everyone a little too into obsessions jewelry for my taste. I can only imagine Barnabas' mixed feelings at storing Adam in the same room as the hidden jewelry vault. What could actually go wrong? He must regret how often he said that to himself about every major decision which made the show presented him. From the moment that he first kidnapped Maggie, through the point when he agreed to be Quentin's extemporaneous advocate in 1840, just imagine. It's just one I Ching trance. It's just a female version of Adam. It's just keeping the kids in the house with lethal ghosts. It's just another witch trial led by a Trask. It's just a room with a parallel dimension from which escapes seem impossible. It's just a matter of putting a reanimated hulk of a corpse in the care of a mentally unstable felon uh, who keeps stalking a woman he once held hostage. Despite the 5 bullets he took in the back, the last time he saw her, yeah, what could go wrong, right? Oh, goodness. Barnabas is not a dim bulb. He has an enlightenment gentleman's optimism that grows too much his desperation. Still, could we have found another cell for Adam? Because Adam loves jewelry, and Willie loves jewelry, and Maggie loves jewelry. Every once in a while, Dark Shadows goes full on sitcom. The TV guide entry for this one writes itself. This is devoted to a wacky scheme of leaving sentimental evidence of a brainwashing in the victim's purse as a love gift. But when it comes to what could actually go wrong, Willie has learned at the foot of the master, and it was apparently a good lesson because it kind of works. Joe is baffled for a good reason. He exists in a place called reality, but he's alone. Julia really Larry Tates the situation to the halt, ordering Willie into a cell with a homicidal madman, threatening lifelong incarceration, which they both know she probably can't do, but Willie doesn't press it. Few episodes cry out more for a laugh track that it could end with our heroes barely missing the only relevant clue to Adam and Barnabas's connection. Pure Sherwood Schultz, perhaps even Howard Leeds. Maybe Sherwood Schwartz. May the Schwartz be with you. Sorry, I mispronounced the name the first time. Always on this day, be with you always. On this day, in 1968, audiences in theaters were enjoying the film adaptation of Noel Simon's The Odd Couple. Given that it's on TV yet again, it may be the most unstoppable property to come out straight Broadway theater. The film was directed by Gene Sachs, with B. Arthur, was the parent of Daniel Sachs, with whom I worked for a few weeks. Nice guy. I made him late to the airport once, so this is a name drop of a strange shame. Sorry, Daniel. The freeway signs in LA to the airport were very unclear. You missed it too. I mean, you didn't give me a hard time about it, but I've had the issues over this for nearly 30 years. Daniel could also sing the theme to The Odd Couple TV series, the lyrics of which could be heard on the LP that had clips of dialogue from the show. He had it as a child, lyrics by Sammy Kahn. No matter where they go, they are known as the couple. They're never seen alone, so they're known as the couple. But they're laugh-provoking, yet they really don't know they're joking. Don't you find when love is blind, it's kind of odd? Kind of like Willie's obsession with Maggie. Really, just about every relationship on the show, and thus we come full circle. Episode 501. Barnabas takes arms against a sea of Adam. But can he be opposing and him before the creature works his reanimated charm on the single ladies of Collinwood? Adam, Robert Rodin. I love to make things up, and in my defense, when it comes to pulling a whopper, I almost admit it immediately, and then go on telling the tale as if the fact that it's completely false were irrelevant, because it is. We're in the middle of a good story, so just go with it. I mention all of this because even though I fully confess when I am fully improbable, but it's not, or sorry, I am full, sorry, I skipped on, where I am full of beans, people can still take a lot of convincing when something sounds improbable. But it's not. It's an occupational hazard, and the wolf still hasn't caught up with me. It goes with the territory of my hobby of claiming ludicrous things like Ernest Borgnine being Playboy's 1968 Playmate of the Year, claim to which a bewildered cheerleader in the class I was teaching murmured in genuine wonder, how does he know all these things? In the case of episode 501, I can't believe that any description would or could pass as believable. I would certainly not believe me, but I wouldn't believe anyone if they described it. I was eating some barbecue as I watched it, and I think it may have been something in the sauce, or it may have been the fact that it was episode 501. Perhaps the entire Dark Shadow staff was absolutely astounded that this bizarre, wonderfully ridiculous show had been going on for 500 episodes, which was 200 past when the 1960s standards and practices should have seen them canceled. I honestly think they just sat around, convinced that they were sharing a mutual hallucination, and made up the events of episode 501. To test the theory, as far as I know, is top spinning. We begin with Barnabas, one of the most proper, thoughtful, and deliberately civilized heroes of television, loading a gun. A gun! Not the little flintlock he reserves for shooting occult spouses. No, he has gone completely John Wayne, except he's still in men's clothing. He knows this act will either kill him or turn him into a vampire, which is kind of the same thing, but has had it up to here with Adam and his entire storyline. Later, as he is troping around the woods with Julie at her most nagging and ineffectual, he brags about the fact that he is not thinking for once. Here is where I normally stop and do some sort of analysis of the arc of that character Barnabas. But this is so gloriously ridiculous that I'm not. Sure, I need to. I may have it a shot anyway. I think this may be his most human moment thus far. When you think about everything that the man has gone through in his past waking year or so, including this time in suspended animation, I'm not sure I can blame him. And I'm not sure he would stop with Adam. I think he would just go on a murder spree, then definitely lock himself up in the Collinsport jail, him like some sort of Nosferatu Otis the drunk the whole time, just bellowing, not a jury in the land. A potential marriage was destroyed, and then another marriage was destroyed. His mother kills herself. His fiancée jumps off a hill. He winds up in a coffin for nearly 2 centuries. He meets his fiancée again and can't convince her that she is his fiancée. So he has to lose her to some mouth-breathing fisherman. He falls in love with another girl who probably knows he's a vampire. But when he loses her to Peter Bradford at some point, he insists his assistant gets shot in the back 5 times, which is actually a relief, but he sprints him out off the nut house anyway because his only friend keeps poisoning him. There's only one person fancy enough for him to debate great versus mediocrities, but that guy goes off and marries the witch who caused all the trouble he got into the coffin to avoid. So she's back. That's a thing. And he's had to promise to be nice to her. Most of Collinsport knows where his coffin is. He's still trying to figure out how Phyllis Wick fits into all of this. He gets cured and then finds that his life is tied to a big shambling lummox who doesn't even have the decency to kill Willie. And Barnabas probably has to potty train him. Adam, not Willie. But maybe both. Yeah, imagine that. That's how his day begins. Oh yeah, and he can't go to sleep because there's some sort of curse that's going to kill him after making him walk around a foggy soundstage filled with embarrassing special effects. And his sister's ghost won't forgive him, even though he really couldn't control what happened and even begged their influential father to kill him. And she won't stop singing London Bridge. So yeah, we see where thinking has gotten him. Meanwhile, Adam is reenacting a scene from Porky's as he leers Carolyn through the window of Collinwood. His pungent urges inspire a pratfall backward through the main doors, and Liz thinks she can scare him off with elevator music, but he likes it, so when she grabs a knife that just happens to be laying out and attacks him like it's her gang initiation, he responds, and I may have this out of order at this point, but it's all a fever dream anyway, by chasing Carolyn around and grabbing at her from behind as her skirts keep flying up. Yes, their physically arrangement looks exactly like you'd hope it wouldn't, or would. That's between you and your rabbi. He kidnaps her, and that's what's the most peaceful moment in the episode. Okay, guys, I'm going to take a bit of a break. When I come back, I'm going to be at episode 506, page 88. So I'm going to take a bit of a break. I'll get this uploaded, and I'll be back later on today.